Greetings, everyone. My name is Simon Aboud, and I'm part of the real estate and construction team at Plug and Play, and I'm currently located here in Brussels, Belgium. I have today the pleasure to go with you over the different impacts COVID-19 has on several industries, with a particular focus on real estate, construction, and healthcare. Before starting my presentation, I would like to highlight one of my favorite quotes related to the topic, mentioned by Glenn Kellman, the CEO of Redfin, one of the biggest brokerage firms back in North America. And he says that the coronavirus has just made the future we've been preparing for come sooner. Obviously, here you might share my thoughts, where it's actually quite difficult to put better words than his, since, as you know, most industries across the world are currently redefining themselves. And well, this is where innovation plays a role in staying a step ahead and being more resilient, particularly when entering such trying times. So without further ado, let's jump into the presentation. Our time together will be split into three different stages. First, we will go through the impact of COVID-19 on our three different sectors. Second, we will continue with the impact of the virus, but this time on the innovation ecosystem. And third, we'll end up with the trends and opportunities that this COVID-19 situation is unlocking for us. We will now start with a brief overview into our three industries of focus today, being healthcare, real estate, and of course, construction. Let's start with healthcare and some of the issues it is facing. As we know, healthcare providers are on the front line of the COVID-19 war, and unfortunately, due to the overwhelming surge of patients in hospitals, health professionals have high infection rates. And the reason it is actually important to note that is, until date, much of the supply or capacity discussion has focused on masks, ventilators, and ICU beds, which are critical considerations. But most critical piece of the equation is the healthcare workforce. Not only physicians and nurses, but those in any other patient-facing functions, such as cleaners, technicians, patient registration and transport, for example, which might sometimes hold hard to replace skills as well. And obviously, in order to keep those institutions working and minimizing the current delays in operations, those key staff has to stay operational. Obviously, the situation is getting more difficult, with hospital rooms turnover being higher and higher as we speak. Finally, the implications of an overwhelmed healthcare system in which resource rationing may become necessary can impose both operational and ethical dilemmas, which is already the case in several hospitals around the world. Let's now move on to residential real estate. Despite the worries of having businesses closed, we are seeing that the residential rental market is the safest currently to be in for landlords, at least at this early stage of the crisis. Now that working from home is a standard, there are many reasons why having a home and a sense of security will become a focus for the rest of the population. Also, due to the fact that unemployment aid and other types of aid exist, in some countries at least, some people in difficulty will find financial ways to have their rents paid for the moment, particularly with the possibility of having residential loans repayment frozen up to 3 months. Another interesting point is a drop in residential properties being listed online for buying and selling purposes, and this across the world. Despite the historically low interest rates, this trend could be explained by asking a couple of questions, such as, will consumers buy homes? Given the incredible market and job uncertainties, as well as health and safety considerations. Will consumers choose right now as the ideal time to buy or sell a home? Or will they wait? And obviously, just because they can doesn't mean they will. And finally, unfortunately, those uncertain trends translate into the real estate professionals world, which are unfortunately having less short-term work, and have started laying off their staff. Finally, getting to the construction sector. As the effects of COVID-19 are felt around the world, public construction has been one of the very few activities that has been maintained to some extent. Activity is mostly at standstill in most countries, except for some few essential construction sites, in which companies are willing to continue executing their contracts in order to avoid liquidation damages. However, work is expected to halt soon, as supply chains are disrupted by a shortage of subcontractors and materials, and as public agencies and administrations begin to terminate contracts to control expenses. Accordingly, construction companies with high level of debt and low cash reserves may face a liquidity crisis, and therefore will focus on cutting costs in order to weather the storm, which might sometimes rhyme with mass layoffs. In the case of smaller companies and subcontractors, filing for bankruptcy might be the only option. And finally, in the case of bigger companies, internationalization might become less viable as companies reconsider the region in which they want to operate, and countries put more restriction on foreign companies. As we ended our first part, it is important to keep in mind that the three industries, along with several more, are hardly hit by this current unique first-timer situation. Looking closely at the several pain points which has been mentioned previously, it is crucial to start looking at the flip side of the equation, being the opportunities for us, which will be left to exploit, and which we'll be exploring in the third part of our presentation. Moving on to our second section, we will be diving now into the innovation ecosystem and see how COVID-19 has impacted it through a particular focus on merger and acquisition, M&A, venture capital, VC, as well as startups. Starting with the M&A world. COVID-19 is causing buyers and sellers to reassess deal valuations, adjust pricing mechanisms, and implement new methodologies for interim operations and crisis response management at a target, as financial projections and their underlying assumptions might not reflect reality anymore. From a timing standpoint and deal process standpoint, we are seeing disruption caused by the virus, as third-party consent and governmental approvals may take longer to obtain due to the slow pace of operations. And finally, another important point is that it might also take longer and become harder for buyers to obtain third-party financing to fund their purchase price. Now moving to the VC world. As per some surveys, VCs are expected to be slowing down with investment, at least for the short term. And the reason why it is not really clear is simply that we're seeing increased interest in some other topics closely related with the current situations, such as healthcare-related tech, remote work, logistics, and productivity tech. As for venture capitals thinking of exiting some potential portfolio startups, they will have to most probably assess the possibility of staying longer and support further their portfolio startups. The full impact of COVID-19 pandemic will be felt mostly from Q2 and Q3 of 2020 as far as the main KPIs are concerned. The reason being that investments are announced weeks or even months after they are completed, and the timing of their announcement is impacted by news cycles. So basically, what are we actually seeing in Q1 of 2020 is for most part result of the deals from Q4 2019. And finally, as far as some funds are concerned, the ones having their investment period coming to an end soon might have to simply extend in order to meet their goals. Finally, getting to the startup overview. One of the main ways for them to survive in those very uncertain times is to make sure that they can decrease their burn rate, so their monthly spending, as well as increase their runway, or the amount of time they can survive and function without raising another investment round. And here, for the interesting note, is that we are seeing special free corporate real estate consultancy services by real estate consultancy firms to help startups deal with their rent payments as a way to creating new post-COVID leads. Another issue the younger companies are facing is the fact that due to the lockdown and travel ban, no more in-person roadshows for meetings or pitches can happen. And what we're seeing on both the VC and the startup side is that building trust virtually for investment or collaboration purposes is actually much more difficult than it seems, particularly in tight financial situations. And finally, we're witnessing within the startup ecosystem, just like any other types of companies, significant layoff all across the world, and for others, a product pivot towards problematic closer to the ones being mentioned before, being healthcare related tech, remote work, logistics, and productivity monitoring tools. As we have seen in this section, the innovation industry is also slowly facing the new reality which the novel coronavirus is implementing. And corporations, investors, startups, and the innovation world as a whole are no exception to that reality. Let's finally move on to the third and most interesting section of our presentation, which will be giving you some tips on market opportunities and trends in the space of property tech, construction tech, as well as medical and health tech. Starting with property tech, I have listed here 12 of the main uprising trends, as well as relevant startups. Without going in depth into every single one of the topics for the sake of time, I would like to recommend you to have a look at both of them later on. However, I would like to highlight 3 of the most important trends I strongly believe are the most promising ones in the space and which are in bold on the slide. The first one being social distancing generative design. And here I strongly believe that those tools would be very interesting in 2 different use cases. First, if it could allow to automatically redesign repurposed assets, such as turning a hotel into a hospital. So basically here, it's the redesign of the interior spaces that will be needed as fast as possible. So if it could be very fast and provide different schemes, this would be optimal. Second use case would be if it could actually generate interior spaces, taking into account new social distancing standards. So basically here, I would have in mind office spaces for the tenant fit outs. And this would be great of added value as well to speed up the whole different design process in general. Now, second interesting trend is regarding the amenities and inventory automation. First, for the amenities part, with most of the worldwide building maintenance, cleaning, and monitoring staff reaching the age of 55 in the next decade, automation and robotics will be key here, particularly in times of pandemic and lockdowns. Second, for the inventory management part, one of the biggest focus once commercial real estate will reopen for use will be cleaning, and big spending will be done accordingly on that. And this is where being able to cut costs on those big spending will be key for facility managers. And finally, the third big trend I'm seeing here is definitely regarding the tenant health monitoring. With over occupied hospitals, particularly in times of pandemics, homes and workspace are where people would like to stay and have themselves checked. And I believe that future integration of healthcare tools within buildings infrastructure will be a crucial way to regulate hospital visits. And this could see also some kind of new partnership being built between commercial or residential landlords and hospitals or caregivers, and creating some kind of new additional services given by the landlords. Getting to construction technology, I will now give you 3 of my favorite trends in the space. First, maybe obviously, prefab and modular construction. In addition of being faster and cheaper to build at scale, we witnessed that the living proof that such a structure could also be used in different use cases, in urgency uses, such as the building of and the development of hospitals in China and Russia and other places across the world. And I personally hope that this pandemic will be a big wake-up call to move seriously in that direction. Second, one of my all-time favorites is timber construction. With the wish of building and living in more livable cities, particularly in case of pandemics where we spend most of our times indoor, I believe that natural timber should be replacing cold steel and concrete material. It has been proven already as a viable alternative, and I'm very excited to see two of the most ambitious timber projects to come out of ground. The first one being the Olympic Village at Paris 2024 Olympic Games, along with Alphabet Sidewalk Labs project in Toronto, where again, whole neighborhoods will be built out of structural timber. Very interesting right there. And then finally, I strongly believe that part of the future of construction sites, particularly with the deployment of 5G and edge computing, will be made out of small and cheap robots doing favorite basic workforce construction tasks, such as bricklaying, concrete pouring, etc. And it is incredible, particularly in times of pandemic, that one of the reasons why sites are closed is mostly because they're populated by human labor. So if we could have a minimum of human workforce, to the exception of maybe specialized engineers, most already less construction sites would be on lockdown today. Finally, when it comes to medical and health technology, those are some of the most interesting topics currently trending in the industry, along with some startups in the space. Here, which is quite interesting to pinpoint, is the focus of having everything remote, and most importantly, being able giving the possibility to patients and potential care needers to get consultations and advices from their actual caregivers or doctors without the need of actually being physically near them. And here, the reason why I'm also bringing this slide up is actually to move to our final slide, which focuses in the med tech and health tech symbiosis, along with real estate technology and construction technology. And finally, we're getting to our last slide, where we're seeing the high potential collaborations between different sectors, and particularly between the health tech and med tech, again, with real estate technology and construction technology. And so we can see here that all yellow text in both real estate and construction are the big synergies and vice versa. And some of them being then that in real estate, we could have tenant health monitoring, leftover space repurposing, social distancing, generative design could be also good for healthcare, amenities and inventory automation, indoor air quality monitoring, asset sanitation, and social distancing monitoring. And we can see that health tech also have some kind of interesting things for real estate, such as medical chatbots, telehealth, remote automated care, digital health. All this could be integrated again within the infrastructure of the real estate. And same here with the additional non-COVID spaces, which goes again with the social distancing, generative design, and leftover space repurposing. And on the construction side, we can see that we have prefab and modular construction, as well as timber constructions as fast way to create emergency spaces, as we're seeing again back in China and Russia, as well as social distancing monitoring, COVID-19 symptom monitoring, and labor tracking. Technologies that could be definitely used as well inside the healthcare ecosystem. And just to finish here, I'm mentioning here 3D printing, supply chain, and quick to build emergency spaces. We're seeing a lot of architecture firms and construction firms moving into 3D printing to create some kind of additional supply chain for masks or ventilators and other ways. So this is a nice way of inventive ways as well to actually create those kind of connections. And other than that, obviously, cybersecurity is something which is one of the most important topic currently on the table in healthcare, and remote surgery as well. And on that, I would like to end by saying that I strongly believe that as bad as the current situation of the world is, it is also a unique opportunity to challenge our long-lasting industry-agnostic preconceptions and to really start preparing ourselves through a cross-disciplinary lens for the next foreseeable future ahead. Thank you and stay safe.